Okay, John, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you giving some of your time over. Well, let's get started into the questions. First question I wanted to ask you was, could you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in the USA, particularly in Detroit, and how that had impact on your creative expression?
Yeah, so I grew up on Detroit's east side, which some might say back in the mid '80s really didn't make a difference of which side you grew up on outside of, maybe having family and friends on one side or the other. But, the east side kind of looked like the west side. It wasn't really much going on either side visually, but artistically, I think the same thing was going on, and I just didn't know it yet until I got older. But my parents had a great vinyl record collection, which I have now. I have half of it; the other half is in storage. My dad doesn't want to take it out. But I grew up listening to some of everything, from Pat Metheny to Herbie Hancock, Return to Forever to Miles Davis, Earth, Wind and Fire, Marvin Gaye, some of everything. So
Sure.
there was just music when I grew up. There were no genres. So I was hearing all sorts of things growing up, and then when I was four, I had a little toy keyboard, and my dad noticed me playing along with the record player one day, and he asked me would I want a keyboard, and I said sure. You fast forward to a couple other moments in my life growing up. Both my parents were very supportive of myself and my other siblings with whatever we were interested in, whether it was instrumental music or there was one weird point in time in my younger days. I was interested in horseback riding, so they got me a subscription to a magazine, that specializes in that. I never followed through with it, but anything they wanted to, or anything we wanted to do as kids, rather, they were always supportive, and I think that translated into how I try to be now with other younger artists or even my own kids. But I also try to remember that too when I meet strangers or people who are just starting out and they might want advice, just to remember those who invested in me, whether it was through words or times I give away gear to different people. And that's another part of just growing up. It's like, you don't have to be selfish, but if you have something you can give somebody, share it, because you never know how they're going to use it or what they're going to end up doing with it until you give it to them. So um, that was a big thing with me growing up, was just having a very supportive family and a support system in general, from family members, neighbors. Everybody knew I was the guy that always would be out on the porch playing the keyboard. And so I'm happy to be able to be where I am in life right now and just, continue to do what I do best and make my family and friends proud.
Cool. That sounds like you had a really great foundation there.
Hmm.
You're lucky, and then quite a lot of people, I guess, in that community.
Hmm.
Um, I know you're a family man. I did a bit of research on you. Your wife's Canadian, right?
Yep, she is, yes.
Is she from like the Ottawa side?
She's from Nova Scotia, so east.
Oh wow, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Is that
far east.
it's not that's not the French speaking enclave, is it? I know.
No,
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 no.
that's Ottawa, Montreal,
That's right. That's right. And I guess
Quebec City.
New Brunswick and stuff like that. They speak French. Cool. So
Hmm.
how did you guys meet?
We met on the funny story. We met on MySpace,
Oh, cool.
so that kind of shows you around that time frame of when we met. So we met on MySpace, talked for a bit. Um, we used to get phone cards to call one another. This was back before,
Before the communications,
phone
yeah.
plans. Yeah, phone plans
Sure.
opened up. Um, we lost contact for a few years, and then I randomly emailed her, and then just got in touch with her again, and then everything kind of worked out from there. Started dating long distance.
Cool.
That wasn't fun. She was in Toronto at the time,
Okay.
so we were dating long distance, and then she's I can't take the long distance thing. I'm moving to Windsor. Moved to
Okay.
Windsor, Ontario, which is just across the Detroit River here, and then 2015 got married the day before my birthday. So
Oh, cool. And so
easy for me. Yeah, I better not have an issue with the anniversary date, or it's going to be a problem.
That's funny. So I guess you had to go through all that immigration stuff that you have to go through when you do that
Yep.
with America.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in the United States for 10 years and I was married, and unfortunately my marriage didn't work out, so I kind of know how that goes. It's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. So, like, and another question I wanted to ask you was, what was, I know you had influence from Marcus Belgrave and people like Chick Corea. What are they some of the most prominent influences you had musically? Did you have other people who mentored you in that way?
I think it a lot of really around that time, like early 2000s. A lot of it was I was heavy into Pat Metheny.
Okay.
Without even knowing how to fully verbally put it into words yet. I didn't know why I was into him as much as I was, but from an arranging and a harmonic and a melodic point of view, his music, the Pat Metheny group, a lot of their music, like, I would go and get these CDs my dad had, and I would go and buy other CDs while in college. It was just like a lot of his music was really influential that time in the early 2000s, musically as well as emotionally. It was the first music or the first artist where I discovered that, like, depending on how you make or create music, you can influence people's feelings.
Sure.
They can feel better, they can feel worse. If you're feeling bad, you can kind of have a song and go with that. You can name a song, a title, and then musically draw that picture for that person, or you can just make the song and not have a title and let the listener make their own picture.
Sure.
But that was the first time where I figured that you could use music in more than just a way to make something that people can listen to. Oh yeah, I like it. So it was him that kind of showed me that music is this deeper thing that you can use to not just enjoy it, but just to sit and listen to and just drift off somewhere mentally if you want, for a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, because I've been a DJ for years, and when I was younger, I kind of used to. I guess I was a bit more in my head about music, and I used to buy it mentally. But as I've gotten older, what I found is the music that gives me that very strong feeling is usually the stuff that is not as disposable as some of the other stuff. So I totally hear what you're saying. So what are you? What age are you? Are you in your 40s or?
I'm 38, so I'll be 39 in June.
Oh yeah, so you're oh yeah, so you're kind of like the next. You're the next.
There.
You're like the next generation of Detroit.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah, sure. So apart from like jazz and techno, are there many other? I know you mentioned you were just listening to music, but are there many other genres that you listen to? Is it mostly black music?
So in high school, I played French horn in a concert band, and that opened up my ear to a lot of symphonic music. So I like a lot of Bach, a lot of Bartok.
Oh, really? Wow.
I like classical piano. I love Debussy. A lot of John Cage. And then, like, early years of college, like, I started getting into Gregorian chants and a lot of choral pieces, just from these different things that we had to study. So
wow.
I think that all came from being in high school, just being open to playing and listening to other styles of music. And I would seek out these different composers and the different pieces that they made, because you have to study all that stuff in college, the different music histories, dating back to the classical, neoclassical era, all that stuff, and further beyond. So you hear these different things, you've got to study them for exams, and so every now and then you come across a piece or a composer that you really like, so you start to go into their work.
Okay.
And so similarly though, like as we get towards the techno introduction around 2007, aside from music, you know, like once I started traveling internationally, like I began to become inspired by landscapes and the different things that I saw. So I tried to put that into music as well, you know, and now it's being inspired by different chefs or different approaches to making food. You know, something that I don't think we pay a lot of attention to. It's like, yes, you know, we eat. It's something that we need to do so we don't starve. But you know, I look at a chef or a well-trained chef like a very good musician or someone who calls themselves a producer. They're able to make something from nothing, you know. So you can't call yourself a chef if you're going out buying these pre-made meals and then come home, you disassemble them and then put them back together again and call it your own, you know.
Sure.
Not quite the same thing. So even that I'm just always looking for newer ways to be inspired by things that's not music.
Wow.
So
that's a very interesting perspective. I've never really thought of it like that. So like, I guess you're kind of a later generation. Like, you know, I grew up in the 80s and I first got into techno in the late 80s. So at that time, in the late 80s, we had that first Detroit album that came out, I think, on a British label that was licensed. And it was, you know, a very, very new thing. You know, it sounded different from anything we'd heard, apart from, say, like the whole electro first hip hop stuff that came out. So since then, it's changed a lot, and so I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the impact that the proliferation of technology has had in the last, say, 20 years on music. I guess there's pluses and minuses, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely pluses and minuses. I get the feel and sense that it's kind of half and half. I think a lot of people that get into this style of music, you know, they want to do the right thing by, you know, learning their history, maybe learning how to play an instrument, or maybe learn how to make their own music and whatever that approach is. And then I think once maybe they see how difficult it is or that it's going to take time, they choose not to.
Yeah.
But I think it just depends on what your goal is and like what you are doing this for. If anything, you know, like me, for example, I always laugh and tell the story. I didn't know that when people play music at these concerts that they got paid for it. I would just, you know, like, for example, like I went to an Earth, Wind & Fire concert when I was about 12 or 13, maybe 10 or 11. And I just remember seeing how much fun they were having on stage. And I was like, man, that looked like so much fun. I would love to do that, you know, not even knowing you can get paid for it. And so when you have something like COVID, you know, when the pandemic happened and a lot of people weren't getting paid to go out and play anymore, it's like, are you still going to make or create music if you even did it before the pandemic started? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if you got into this business to tour and to make money, well, now that nobody's touring, now what? You know, it's a lot of us here in Detroit, we know the ones in our city and not the ones who are in this for the love. We know the ones who are just here for, you know, for a check.
Sure.
And so, you know, when you take the attitudes of why people are doing this, and then you bring in now the technology, which has advanced to the point where you don't even have to have any musical experience. You got all of these apps and plugins and sites that you can compile chords and do this and do that. And I can hear a track and tell when somebody played it in, or they, you know, picked something and kind of moved it around a bit, because these programs, they use the same voicings, if you will. And so I have a track called Times Have Changed. It came out in 2020. And like I made that track with the intention of making something that another human or computer program wouldn't be able to duplicate, just to see if I could make something for the dance floor, but that was theoretically intricate enough to where only someone who like has a music degree or a really good ear or sense of harmony could discuss, and we could talk about that track. You know, it works on the dance floor, but in no way is it in 4/4. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So being able to do that and to kind of just, you know, as my way to musically rant on, and this was, I started the track back in 2019, finished it in 2020, but that was just like a little upset phase that I was having, seeing as how things were going with the technology and, you know, making the average producer lazier because now, you know, this gear does everything for them. But you know, it makes more people want to make music. But it's like, well, is more people making music, or are they just, you know, throwing together, you know, these pre-cooked ideas like I mentioned earlier?
Sure. Yeah. I hear you. I remember hearing Giles Peterson interviewing Mark Mack from Four Hero about 15 years ago, and he didn't say it in those words, but he pretty much said, you know, I think Giles Peterson said something like, you know, when you hear Four Hero, they've got a sound, and you can tell it's them. And I think the response was something like, and I'm paraphrasing, yeah, when you kind of start playing about with music and you know all this technology that's proliferated, it gets harder and harder to have a sound, because like you said, it's all these pre-cooked, you know, programs that have been made for you. So I totally get you, and there's just this. In a sense, there's lots of music out, and there's lots of really good music out nowadays. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of disposables and things that sound like they should be good, but there's no soul. There's no kind of, you know, it's like AI music, for example.
Yeah,
it might as well be.
It reminds me of something that Mike Banks told me maybe about 10 years ago, maybe 11. And it was something that a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to take. It was two things. The first was like when I first started trying to make this music and I would play him this stuff, he would say, I heard that before. And that's all he would say. And I would just sit there looking at him and he would just sit there looking at me. So I'm thinking, okay, and the next couple of times I played him something, I heard that before. But I'm trying to make what I think he wanted to hear versus, you know, me trying to find myself and my own sound, which was one of the main things he showed me. He never showed me how to make a track. You know, he gave me different tools and approaches to use, but never was if this is how you do it from start to finish. But what that did was, later on, when I finally got it, I remember him telling me, or along the way rather, I was getting closer, you know, back when he would say, okay, now you're onto something. And he would show me more techniques and different things that I could use. What he said to me one day was, and this was, like I said, 10 years ago, so now it's probably 10 times the amount. But he said, there's 1,000 of you over in Europe, to every one of you. So what makes your music any different than theirs? Now I think it's safe to say it's 10,000 guys to every one of me. Like you just mentioned, you know, or like Giles said, what makes what makes my music any different than theirs?
Sure.
So when I sit down to make something, or when I get ready to finish it or put it out, I'm asking myself, is this, or would this stand out and attract 10,000 others right now?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the level that I try to work at, and so that I don't get comfortable. And that's an inner Detroit thing in me. You know, you know, you don't want to ever become too comfortable where you think you have it, or you're famous, you're this, you're that. You don't have to work or strive or dig deeper or harder for you to find something else that'll, you know, take your sound or your approach towards music to the next level. So I'm always searching and always finding, because I know there are newer people coming out, and that's great. You know, I'm competitive as well. You know, I get that from Mike. So, you know, I love hearing other musicians and music that's better than mine, because it makes me Not that I like mine, but it makes me go back and work a little bit harder, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the gist of the original meaning of actual competition. I think in the beginning, it was a way that people could bring out each other's strengths as opposed to kind of dominating. And I think it's just turned into that. And like you said, when you start thinking you're it and you've made it, you're kind of moving into the realm of the ego. And I don't think that's really got your best interest at hand.
Right.
So that's quite a profound perception. Again, I never really thought about it like that in that way. It's great to get feedback. Another question I wanted to ask you was, and I know you mentioned you've got a day job teaching in a university, but a lot of people in your field are DJs, and they use DJing as a way to supplement their income because of the fact that it's quite difficult for artists to make money these days with all the streaming services that are out there, and the lack of remuneration from the corporates that are in control of that. So is that something you do? Are you just purely a musician, or do you play about with DJing?
Yep. So I'm a musician. Like I just mentioned, I'm an educator. I have had a few photography gigs, not many. I play live where I use CDJs and keyboards or synths.
Oh, so, cool.
I don't go by a DJ. I just say Jon Dixon live. But then I'm finishing up a music therapy program right now, so I should have my bachelor's in the next few months in that, and I'm just looking at that as another way to use the amount of knowledge that I've acquired over the years, as well as the contacts in Detroit country and globally to use music now in a different way. So you're just going back, from my statement earlier about why people get into this genre. I'm looking at myself as, how do I want to use what I know musically? And I've always had a passion for helping people, which is why I love teaching. And, it's something that I see myself doing over the next 20, 30 years, but doing it in my own unique way. Of course, following all the rules and everything that goes along with music therapy. But just like with standard music, there are all these rules that they teach you in college. You have to have theory 1, 2, 3, 4, and music history. You learn all of this stuff, but you learn it so that you can break the rules or change the rules or create your own rules. And so I'm looking at music therapy as that same thing. Theoretically, I'm overqualified to be making electronic music, because I have a music degree. You don't need one, but I have one, and I know when and when not to use it. I don't always have to use it, but if a situation comes up where, Carl Craig calls me to come play alongside him, and we haven't had a rehearsal, I don't know what he's going to play. Now I have the ear and the theory and the knowledge to be able to hear what he's playing, internalize it, analyze it, and then know what to play from a musician's point. But from the point of making this music, I know how to go about playing to complement the track, not to get in the track's way.
That's cool. So you mentioned you're is it a doctorate that you're doing? Not a doctorate. You're doing
it's a bachelor's program for music therapy. Yeah.
So you're a student as well as a teacher.
Yes.
And are you doing that in the same university or a different?
So this is an online program that I started. It's a 2-year program where if you have a music degree already, it cuts the entire music therapy program in half. So you just focus on all your music therapy courses. You learn guitar, and there was a couple of other supplementary courses, a few psychologies, biology, statistics that goes along with the program.
Oh wow, that sounds cool. So you basically transmigrate the skills from playing keyboards to guitar.
It wasn't that easy. I wish it was that easy.
Sure.
It was a tough transition. I mean, it took me months for me to be as comfortable as I am now. But I remember,
Okay.
doing these homework assignments, I would punch my guitar and bang it on the bed because, the program was an online program. And so every 2 weeks we had to record, 6 to 8 different videos doing these different assignments. And, this being fairly new to me, like I had to figure it out and record them and send it in for a grade. And it was just annoying and I would get frustrated, like whatever, admit it whether they liked it or not. Ended up passing the class, but even still in that, like you have to have, there's a proficiency exam that goes along with this. Like you have to display a certain amount of knowledge and skill set on guitar before you can move forward in the program. So, and that kind of helps me and kind of humbled me a bit when I teach my new students now. And I remember, me picking up this new instrument not even 2 years ago. And so how they putting myself in their shoes, not that I already didn't, but it gives me a little bit more patience with them and more understanding, and let them know that I know what it's like to be in that chair because I had to learn guitar not too long ago, and
Sure.
tricky. So
it's like you're kind of like an empath, I guess. You can be more have more empathy for them. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so in regards to like this next question, I'm going to paraphrase it a bit, just based upon what you just told me. But with techno, when we first got techno, we were all involved in the kind of whole acid house kind of rave scene here in the UK, and I think in a way, British culture embraced that genre more than the mainstream of America, I guess, at the time. And at the time, like I said earlier, it was a very new sounding genre. But I feel like in recent years, it's kind of gone back to its roots in a sense, in that it's gone more into like jazz. And it's influenced many people here in the UK. For example, people in the broken beat, new jazz scene. Where do you see this going in the future?
I think that's up to the individual. I think that's what's great about certain individuals here in Detroit. I think a main and important key or aspect to that question is the education of everything. I was just talking with YG a couple weeks ago, and he was just telling me his plan and vision with the Underground Music Academy, and he told me he wanted me to teach a class the weekend of movement. He said he's aiming to have one of the rooms ready. But it's people like him that and myself, that Banks as well, a couple others, that see the importance of the education, not just the history, but the education of the music business, the education of knowing that you might not become famous if that's what you're doing this for. There's some things that you should probably understand and know. Probably know that it's not always good for you to be on your phone looking at what you think the world might look like in this genre of music online, or because of what you're saying online, while at the same time the internet can be a tool. I remember when, I'm sure you can too, when YouTube first came out and you really wasn't sure what to search for, but now you can search for anything, any style of music, and you get it. It's a great tool to have. But I think more importantly than where this is all going is just for the individual to have a sense of who they are as a person, especially when you call yourself making music. I keep going back to chefs. You can study at the finest culinary institutions and learn all of these different styles from France or from Italy, or these different techniques from all of these different countries, but it's the same ingredients that the chefs are using. It's just now, how do you look at great restaurants? It's like I think chefs are asking themselves the same thing I'm asking myself. It's like, how can I take music to the next level? Just like how do you take food to the next level? There are newer methods, there are newer things that might be coming out in the kitchen, newer ways to approach cooking food, just like there are newer approaches to making food, pieces of technology, um, as we touched on earlier. But again, just knowing how to use the technology, and having a little bit of, going back to the word again, education.
Sure.
About where this new piece of equipment generated from. If it's a drum machine, learn about the first drum machine, or how drum machines work, or the different knobs, or the different terminology that you can use across all drum machines. Therefore, you have to know what pan searing means. You should know what simple as boiling or baking. Have different ovens, you have different temperatures. Two ovens are the same, and it's the same in music. It's like, I have a keyboard, have the same keyboard, but maybe they play differently depending on who owns the keyboard or how much use has been put into the keyboard. So all these different things come into play. But I think if the producer knows what they want to say artistically, then the sky is the limit in terms of where the genre can go. But I think if everybody only focuses on, I want to make it, I want to tour, I want to make money from this, then you're setting yourself up before you even begin for failure. Because you're not guaranteed that, and if that's your main motivation, or if that's what's driving you, well, then you're in the wrong business.
Sure.
Yeah. But
I get you. Yeah, I think that's something that's done not just only in music, but like in a lot of different things, where people want to be a workshop leader, they want to be an author, they want to be, a teacher before they've actually learnt it. And that's what I kind of loved about America. There was a much more value on education there, I guess, because like here, you got the government. The government will pay your rent, and it's a bit of a nanny state. But I guess in America, if you don't get up off your ass and do something, you're on the streets. It's a bit more of a harsh reality. Totally hear you. So moving on, what I found interesting about when I was living in America, I was living in Southern California, in San Diego, so I wasn't really hanging out in the ghetto per se. I was in more of a middle class kind of enclave, and what I observed was that within the whole dance music scene, nobody really knew about Detroit or Chicago music. It was, I guess, due to kind of segregation and stuff like that. And I had an experience here a few years ago where there's a guy actually from San Diego living here locally, working for the local authorities as a social worker. And I turned him on to one of my podcasts, one of my mixes, which was mostly like techno and US-based dance music. And he was like, "Wow, that was amazing, dude. Is that stuff from here? Where's that stuff from?" I said, "It's from America." And he was like, "Really?" And so what I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on the visibility of Detroit techno? I mean, for example, if you say techno to most people who are not educated on the subject, they have a completely different concept of what it actually is.
I think it's a lot more visible and known, I think, within the U.S. now. Thanks to technology, thanks to
the internet, right?
The internet, yeah. And thanks to curiosity, you might hear something in the commercials. I think, there's further education. There's a difference from dance music. There's a difference from EDM. There's a difference from house. There's a difference from techno. That's like one of the examples I like to always give is like when you look at the genre of jazz, and if you know your history, there's these subcategories of jazz from when it first started up until now. You had swing, you had big band, you had bebop, you had hard bop, you had post bop, you have smooth jazz, you have, all these different types that would fall under the category of jazz. And it's the same thing with dance music. You know, there's house, there's deep house, there's EDM. You know, there's drum and bass if you want to put it in there. And I think a lot of people, they just categorize everything as either techno or as house. You know, like one of the big debates, you know, was Beyonce has a house record, and I listened to the record and I'm like, it's not a house record, it's a dance record. You know, it's like if you knew the difference, but nobody wants that education, or nobody is like, well, if you can get on the internet and post your opinion about this album, then you can get on the internet and do some research about, well, what is house music, or where did house music start? You know, what are the roots? What does a house track sound like? You know, who plays house? Who's playing house? Who's making house in the house scene right now? Oh, the internet says Luke Slater.
Okay, yeah.
Is that his name? Luke
Luke
Solomon. I'm sorry, Luke Solomon. It's like, okay, Luke Solomon's a house DJ. Oh, Luke Solomon also wrote something on Beyonce's album. I didn't know that. You know, so it's these things of connecting the dots and doing a little bit of research.
Sure.
If you want, or which you should, before making the assumption, oh, well, I don't like EDM. I don't like Beyonce's new record. It's not EDM.
Sure,
I don't think. That's just, you know, my opinion. But it's great that, you know, if anything, more people are hopefully wanting to know more of what house music is, or what dance music is, and good dance music, or good house, or good techno, you know. And I'm glad that it's getting some attention, or more attention now as time goes on, and more importantly than that people are. I think it was Diplo that he was giving a speech or something where he recognized Chicago and Detroit while he was at the Grammys, because a lot of people probably don't know. But then again, every year when Movement Festival comes in May, you know, everybody from all over the world is here. So a lot of people do know. A lot of people do come from other parts of the country to come here for that weekend because of how lively it is, and there's so much going on. And you can see just about any artist who you see at any other festival, dance festival in the world here in Detroit. It's just a matter of which one do you go and see, you know.
So is that a festival that happens in Detroit? I've not heard of that. When does that happen?
Yep. So Movement happens it's Memorial Day weekend, so the last weekend of May. Yep, that's Saturday, Sunday of every year.
Cool. So who's the organizer of that?
Paxahau, Paxahu, I believe.
Paxahau.
Yeah, Paxahau. Yep, it's probably the biggest festival in the U.S. for techno and house music.
Is that right? Wow, I'm going to look at that, man. That sounds really cool. I saw a video. So carry on. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say you probably seen it on online, maybe. But everybody plays there. Like I went and checked out Godie's set last year. I had a chance to hang out with him for a bit, and then I caught some of Jeff Mills' set as well. That was cool. And this year, Rob Hood is playing live, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do. I've got to play with Carl Craig that opening night, so that should be fun.
That sounds cool, man.
Yep.
I saw a video of you performing at Dimensions Festival in Croatia, and I thought it was just amazing. And I've always wanted to go to that, and I just recently got a potential to go there as press this year, which I'm really excited about. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that festival?
I like it. I love Dimensions. It was always a good. The few times I did it felt like a homecoming. I think the first year, I remember meeting Charisma for the first time. I think Ox 88 was also performing.
Oh wow!
I think Wine Atkins was doing something with Moritz Van Oswald. So it was great to be able to see them and catch up with them. And then like the festival got rained out.
Oh no!
So they had to cancel it for the following year, which I think is the video you saw. But that same year, I ended up meeting Godie on our ride back to the airport. It was about a 3.5-4 hour ride, and we probably spent 2.5 of those hours talking about Pat Metheny. And like as soon as I mentioned Pat Metheny and he mentioned Pat Metheny, it's like we instantly clicked on on a level that nobody else could explain, because we understand that's like a language and a level of music in its own. And because, we both had that, he was like, well, I'm working on this album. I'd love to have you a part of it. This is just all based off of conversation. He hadn't heard me play or anything that I'd done, so that was one of the other highlights of being a part of that festival is, you never know who you're going to meet. And, a lot of times you're on the same deal as maybe a lot of people who you've never heard. So
Sure.
Again, using this tool, the internet that we have, one of the things I do now is whenever I play out, I always try to see who's on the lineup or see who's playing. If I haven't heard them, look them up, see what their stuff is, and then just try to network or get in touch with them if I can. So I always try to bring out a couple extra records when I go out.
Okay.
Cards,
Oh, fair play.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I know they do another festival, the same organizers. That's like more of a reggae dub festival called Outlook.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've always been intrigued by that. And I have a friend here who lives locally who is the ex-girlfriend of the organizer. So I'm looking to negotiate a way to get there, when they next do it. I'm going to start wrapping up in a bit, Jon.
Okay.
And I've got one more question for you.
Yep.
I just wasn't sure how this one would go down, but what I wanted to ask is, are you a man of faith? Are you spiritual? And if so, how does that impact your creative process?
I am. It influences my creativity, I think, in a way of, for me, I think a lot about like improvisation and how things can come to you so quick without you even knowing how or where come from.
Sure.
If that makes any sense. I think it's a thing where, I believe that like God gave everybody a gift. It's just a matter of knowing what yours is, and then depending on how you use it or how you know to use it will determine how far you go with it. So me, I think that, these moments in my life happen they happen when they're supposed to happen. Like the same year I met Mike Banks and everybody at Underground Resistance was the same year, a couple months prior, where I felt like I had made everything musically that was possible. So if I would go days and weeks without touching the keyboard, and back then I was making more jazzier stuff, but I wouldn't make anything. It was like I ran out of ideas. Literally, like I made everything that I heard, and then all of a sudden I meet Mike and these guys, and like I never look back. Now in terms of getting an idea of what to make. So I do think that there's only so much that we as humans are in control of, and then everything else you just kind of have to accept, whether you want to or not, and then take it and learn. Take it as a lesson learned, or a better way to put it, I guess, is a friend of mine said this. We were talking about COVID, when everything locked down. He was just saying that a lot of people were complaining about things being closed or this or that, but he said him and what he was doing, I can agree completely, is that he used it as an opportunity. And I look at myself like I started this online program, for music therapy, and it's like it was a lot of work, a lot of schoolwork and things. And it's like if the world was open and there was no pandemic, I don't know how I would have been able to teach and travel and gig and do all of this stuff. We had a second child in 2020, so there's everything that goes along with that.
Oh, wow.
as well as doing an online program. So the fact of everything shutting down and us being in lockdown, I made a track called While in Lockdown in 2020, and it's like, well, while in lockdown, I started a program. I did this, I did that. So it's like I used it more as an opportunity to do something that when it's over or when it's as close to being over, which nobody knew back then, whenever it's over or whenever I finish, then I can look back and say, well, during this crazy time in the world when everything shut down, here's what I did to further myself or be able to further provide for my family or
Sure.
Because our kids are going to ask us, and we're all going to have this conversation next month or next year or 10 years from now. It's like, what were you doing in 2020 and 2021? And it's all so fresh in my mind, and at the same time, I forget every now and then, too, that, we had a pandemic. But it's good to have reminders of how hard it was and how weird it was, but also, like, what made you stronger and what gave you purpose during that time,
Sure, yeah. So I guess multiple blessings in disguise for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, same for me. I everything soared for me, even though I was a bit concerned about what was going to happen. I knew there was a spiritual force moving through on the periphery of my reality that said everything's going to be okay. And I think some other people weren't so fortunate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're on the other side of it now. Cool. Well, Jon, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving us this time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Is there anything you want to plug? Any websites? Any things that you can direct people towards?
Sure. The best way to support any artist these days is Bandcamp. So you just do a search, JONDIXON. Bandcamp is cool.
Cool.
I love everybody in the UK. You guys are my biggest Bandcamp supporters. So thank you to everyone listening. And even those listening that may not be from the UK, if you support me, thank you. Over the past 2+ years, like any purchase that anybody has made from Bandcamp or from my site or whatever, any order for whatever music, like all of that money goes right back into the music in some kind of way, whether it was tuition or right back into the manufacturing of these records. So
cool.
I'm not pocketing this money for myself. It literally goes right back into it. So thank you all so much.
Fair play. Have you got any plans of coming to the UK at any point?
Not as of now. I would love to. I'm only a couple hours flight away. So if you're interested,
sure.
Just go to or hit me up on anything: Facebook, Instagram.
Sure.
My website's foreverforward.com.
Sure.
The number 4 EVR, the number 4 WRD.
Absolutely.
And just go to the contact link.
Well, we're planning on doing some events in the future. I'm sure the money's going to come in for us to do that. I want to bring people over from, Detroit and other parts of the US. So yeah, I'd definitely love to have you over at some point. It'd be great. It'd be great to have you, and we're just holding up the vision. And if there's anybody else you think, any of your peers that you think would be interested in being interviewed for our podcast, that would be also a very, very cool thing.
Okay.
I'd just love to. We're always looking for new content, so
okay.
I'd really appreciate
I'll send you a couple of names over through Facebook if that's cool.
That would be cool, Jon.
Perfect.
Again, Jon, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and we'll have a chat once I stop recording.
Excellent. Sounds good.
All right, Jon. Thank you.